I think where we're getting at is something else that I'm also really interested in, which is this theme that keeps coming up when you talk about filmmaking and identity, is who gets to tell a certain story, right? Who has the right to a story? And I want to read something that, Grace, you wrote a couple years ago. It was a kind of provocation that you were asked to write about something that was just kind of bugging you. And then it became, I think, a call to action about who gets to tell a story and where especially public funding goes. So I'm going to read just a paragraph from this essay that you wrote in Current that's addressed to PBS. Your commitment to diversity at PBS is not borne out by the evidence. When you program an 8-part series on Muhammad Ali by Ken Burns, what opportunity is there for a series or even a one-off film to be told by a Black storyteller who may have a decidedly different view? Your chief programming executive recently announced an initiative to fund, quote, the next generation, unquote, of BIPOC makers, but where does that leave the current generation? This is about equitable support for BIPOC filmmakers to author their own narratives at all stages of their careers that rival the access and support seen by their white peers. Emerging filmmaker initiatives enforce the false narrative that BIPOC artists are predominantly first-timers, lacking in experience.
Was there a question?
Can you just tell us a little bit about where this came from? You've worked a lot with PBS, right? This is, I'm going to say, maybe a bit of a risk, right? To be so open about criticizing, still a large supporter of documentary film.
This essay came about, the Ford Foundation Just Films, asked 40 artists, filmmakers, journalists to write a provocation about the future of our field. And, documentary, this was in the summer of 2020, which a lot was going on then. And that same summer, I had 2 series on public television. One was this Asian American series. The other was And She Could Be Next, which Yoruba also worked on, which is about women of color transforming American politics as candidates and organizers. We followed historic races across the country, including Stacey Abrams, Rashida Tlaib, Lucy McBath, Veronica Escobar, et cetera. So, I had a lot of experience just, and also finishing films in a pandemic, coming out in the summer of 2020. So I wanted to talk about public television and what it's for. And so the essay really came out just to sort of talk about, sort of the elephant in the room about public television, and which is publicly funded. It was started, PBS was started in the midst of another racial reckoning in the United States in the late 60s. And it was created, the mission was to reflect all of America. At the same time, public television, PBS has always been sort of the home of Ken Burns, who has, for 40 years been and even advertised as America's storyteller. So I just wanted to ask, why is that? Why does he get to take up so much space when we're really trying to reflect all of America? I'm not saying don't give him any space, but just, offer opportunities for other people who've been doing this for a long time. So anyway, it was just a provocation meant to start a conversation, and it was risky because I remember showing to a lot of different people. Maybe I even showed it to you, because PBS is the place for a lot of filmmakers of color to get an opportunity to make something. Prior to streamers and all of this, it is part of the mandate to reflect America's stories. So I feel like I wanted to do that just in order to say, let's do a better job at this, because look at this country right now. We need to reflect all of America, especially if you're being publicly funded by all of us, right? And all of us aren't just telling the stories that Ken Burns is telling. So that's where it came from.
So the question, in case everybody didn't hear, was, did PBS
Yeah.
respond?
So basically, I wrote the essay thinking, okay, I'm just going to write it because I need to get it off my chest. But then journalists started asking the president of PBS, like, oh, did you read this thing by Grace Lee? And Paula Kerger, who's the president of PBS, said, well, I respectfully disagree with her, right? And so at the time, I was in the middle of some health issues, and I just was like, okay, whatever. But the community around me, a lot of, BIPOC filmmakers, we decided we can't let that go unchallenged, right? So we actually created an open letter to PBS. If you go to bipocmakers.com, you can read it. It basically was signed by 800 documentary filmmakers, including many, many prominent filmmakers. And just asking, well, why do you respectfully disagree? And then, sort of talking about like, well, where is the data? Where is the proof that this is not the case? PBS is doing a great job with diversity. And so that turned into a whole thing, with PBS, and started a conversation. And that's how the podcast Viewers Like Us came about, because we realized like, okay, we want to document this kind of movement to talk about like, how are we going to restore the public to public television? I mean, if we can't get it together with public television that's like funded by us, the taxpayers, how are we going to get, corporate streamers and stuff to change in terms of, what they're trying to do with access and, who gets to tell the story? So yes, they did respond, but then we responded back, and it's continuing.